Utah politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin this morning with Representative Chris Stewart. He's here to discuss some of the big issues on the national stage. Representative, great to have you back on the show. Thanks for making time for us.
Hey, it's always great to be with you. Thank you.
Let's get right into the Russia invasion of Ukraine. Really interested in your insight when it comes to the Intelligence Committee. I know there are some things you can't tell us, but what are some things maybe the average American doesn't know that you can talk about?
You know, we've actually been pretty open with some of the information that we have been able to receive, and the intelligence that we've gotten on Ukraine and on Russia and on Russian leader Vladimir Putin has been actually pretty exquisite. So much so, Glenn, that we started saying as early as late October, early November, Vladimir Putin is going to invade Ukraine. And the President of the United States started saying it very, very definitively in December and January. He's going to invade Ukraine. We tried to convince President Zelensky. We tried to convince NATO. Most of them, I think, agreed with us, and maybe a few exceptions, France being notable among them. But you know, one interesting thing that we did during that time period was the intelligence community went to Ukraine and actually to Russia and some surrounding nations, and we asked them to do some polling. How will the Ukrainian people respond? What will they do? And the thing we got back from them was really interesting. It was really clear the Ukrainian people were going to fight. They did not want to live under the thumb of Vladimir Putin. And Vladimir Putin really, we understood the Ukrainian people more than Vladimir Putin did. And he calls them his brothers and his sisters, his cousins. Yet he completely misidentified how they would respond. He thought they would go, well, Vladimir Putin or Zelensky, what difference does it make? And that just wasn't true. Yeah. And they've proven now that they want to fight. They will fight for their own freedom.
Yeah, definitely. What are your thoughts as you see them stand up and fight for their country and what's playing out in that region?
Yeah, it's both inspiring and heartbreaking. I mean, it's hard for us to watch this nation that, you know, many people have been to. Some people have actually vacationed there. And to have it be destroyed just day after day after day, and to see the thousands and thousands of bodies that have been, we've been see in, you know, in television and print media, to see something approaching 3 million refugees now. And I'm afraid the outcome there is obviously heartbreaking for Ukrainian people, but also I don't see this ending anytime soon.
Is Vladimir Putin a war criminal, in your opinion, based on what we're seeing play out?
Well, you know, I want to be careful with the word and the phrase war criminal, because that's actually a legally defined term, a technical legal term. But he certainly should be investigated for conduct that would be war criminal or something like that. And whether he's technically a war criminal or not, he's clearly a brutal dictator who is, you know, his actions have obviously led to the deaths of tens of thousands of people, now innocent people. And
so how should he be held accountable?
Well, we're going to have to wait and see that, Glenn. I mean, first thing we want to do is end the violence there, end the war, do anything we can to protect Ukrainian people. And after that, I do think there's going to be an accounting, but I don't think you're going to have Vladimir Putin subject himself to a Western tribunal. It's just clearly that's not going to happen.
Are the U.S. and its allies and Ukrainian allies doing everything they should be doing, in your opinion?
Well, we lost an opportunity. As I was saying there, sometime between October and February, we knew that he would invade. Many of us were trying to move the administration, trying to convince them, hey, start sending weapons now. Send the Vulcan missile send the drones, send the air or surface to air missiles, ammunition. And we lost about an 11 or 12-week window where we didn't. And now it's much, much harder to do that, obviously, as we try to move it across the Polish border in a war environment. Now, there's still more that we could do there. I think there's probably some further sanctions we should consider. But I want to be really clear as well, Glenn. I do not support sending American forces to engage and to fight Russian soldiers in Ukraine.
I want to get to one other thing on this point real quick. What do you think, or what do you make of when you take a look at how private companies and private institutions are responding to Russia? Is that having an impact and harming Russia?
It has had an impact, and I'm so glad they've been able to do that. And by the way, President Xi in China is surely watching that as well, as he evaluates, well, am I going to do the same thing in Taiwan? And I think it's been an overwhelming response from the private sector, both in the financial services, as far as sanctions. I mean, McDonald's, for heaven's sakes, there's many, many examples of business leaders just saying, look, we're not going to support this in any way.
Okay, our time is flying by, but I want to get into one other thing at least, and that's the economy. Recently, the Deseret News and Hinckley Institute polling Utahns to find out what is most important to them when it comes to Congress at this very moment, and it's getting the economy back on track. We're looking at record inflation. Here in Utah, our housing market skyrocketing, trillions in a deficit. What are you and your Republican colleagues committed to doing to work with this administration in improving the economic outlook?
Yeah, that's a great question, and once again, this impacts everyone, but if you're a working person, if you're in the lower income brackets, it affects you far, far more than it does someone who's wealthy. And there's really only one solution to this now. It's not the supply chain interruptions. That's not the cause of inflation now. It's not Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. That had a marginal effect on the energy industry, but that's not the root cause of inflation. Inflation is because of government spending. We spent $6.2 trillion in 18 months. And we simply have too much money in the economy now. And the only way to fix that, and I would love to work with the administration or any of my Democratic colleagues on simply getting a handle on how much money the federal government is spending and the deficits that result from that. That's the problem, and I'm afraid, honestly, this isn't going to be fixed by the weekend. We're going to probably be looking at inflation for at least several years. I'm really heartbroken to say.
So a lot of the conversation comes down to politics on both sides here. So what are some ways that both sides can meet in the middle to have significant impact on this situation?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't think there's much chance of that happening in the next 6 or 7 months until the 2022 election. I think much of the focus in Congress and in our nation's capital has turned to the election. But I hope that after the election, it will open up the opportunity to. I would love to start working with people tomorrow, and we shouldn't wait. But honestly, the political environment there is such that Nancy Pelosi controls the reins of powers, Chuck Schumer does, and the president does. And they just haven't indicated much of a willingness to say, hey, you on the Republican side, what could we do to work together? But perhaps after the midterms, there'll be a new day when we can.
Your answer there is fascinating to me, and I do believe it's true that it probably won't be addressed before the election. But how is it that we can have such an important, pressing issue that we can all just say, well, it's going to be pushed off until later?
Well, and that's why, Glenn, I wanted to say, look, I would start working on this tomorrow if we could. I'd do anything we could, but the core of this is government spending. The core of this is how many trillions of dollars the administration and their Democratic leaders have approved through Congress. And they're not talking about cutting that spending. They're talking about spending more and spending more. And I don't know how we reconcile those two things other than perhaps the election that would bring them to the table if the midterms don't go well for them. Perhaps that compels them to say, okay, we need to take a new stance on this. But I don't want to delay it because it's a hard problem. I would engage in this in any way that we could. I think most Republicans would. It just seems like there's not the mood.
And you feel like you and your colleagues are making an honest attempt at doing just that?
For sure we are. I mean, for sure we are. We want to help the American people, and this isn't just a Republican or Democrat thing. Everyone is harmed by inflation, including, as I said, the working poor, the people who can least afford it. For sure we would try to work with them on this.
All right, Representative, we have run out of time. I would like to go into that deeper, but unfortunately, we have to go to break. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.